Good morning, Singapore.
Good morning. We should talk about pulling out perseverance, optimism, and emotional regulation this morning. It's an adrenaline rush this morning. Good morning, Malar. How are you?
Good. All in the morning, right? I'll have a story to tell.
Yes, you do. You'll have a story to tell. Yes. And it's all about learning, isn't it? It's learning. Every time we think, you kind of got through that learning curve and, you kind of figured out most things. Nothing's going to phase you. Something happens and then, it's okay, new learning curve. Here we go again. Okay. I learned something new about myself. I learned something of what I'm not going to do and something which I should be doing, but I haven't done yet. There you go. Good morning, Lewis. Good morning, Lewis. Welcome back. Long time no see. Happy Thursday to you too. Yes, Malay, you're about to say something and I cut you off.
No, I think I should say less.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not able to think well yet. For finally, I haven't woken up. Yes. Who's our guest today?
Today, we have Professor Dr Vinitha Guptan. She's the Vice Chancellor of Saito University College. But and she's not just this is not one of her first forays into education. She's been in education right from the get-go, both in as a starting role, and then later on in Taylor's for 12 odd years before she took on this role as Vice Chancellor at Saito. And she's very, very, the chat we had with her a couple of days ago, she's, like super, I wouldn't even say super, I think her superpower magnified, don't know how many times, right? Very involved in education and having education make a difference. So let's bring her on and let's have a chat with Dr. Vinitha. There we go. Good morning. Oh my God, look at her. She's in the office and she's got a whiteboard with all the scribbles. I feel like I'm back in university.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. Is that one of your lesson plans at the back or your scribbles about?
That's my to-do list.
Your to-do list. Okay, that's a huge to-do list. I can imagine it's a huge to-do list given the role that you play. So good morning and thank you for saying yes to us, Vinitha, or should I say Prof.
Vinitha is good.
And thank you for sharing, allowing us to take your 1 hour in the morning to talk a bit more about education. We'll see if we can do it justice in the 45 minutes. I don't think so, but I think there are some critical questions that are important questions selfishly from our perspective that we want to kind of address. And just to give a frame to those questions, I'm not sure if you saw my post yesterday, and I talked about how my dad was he was a teacher, right? But also from a different perspective, as a father, he had a perspective of how education plays a role or should play a role in our lives, and it did. So our question is around the three stakeholders. Our questions today will be around the three main stakeholders that we see in the pipeline that takes us from education to working, right? That flips us from being, playing as an adult and actually being in an adult world, right? And the three stakeholders being tertiary educators or education institutions. There's the organization that recruits these talents and the talents themselves. Yeah. So my first question, Vinitha, is this. So as a tertiary educator, preparing this group, molding this group of people that would be talents, that would be the supply chain to organizations, right? You're supplying the brains, the hearts and minds to these organizations. What do tertiary educators need to do to keep relevant, to be relevant?
Okay. First, good morning, and thank you for having me here. And I must tell you, the last 10 minutes of getting onto this platform really got my adrenaline running. I didn't have to have my coffee, just got onto StreamYard and we are there, But thank you for supporting me into getting into this platform. So, I'm not very technology savvy. So, to answer your question, Moni, I think let us not look at tertiary education as the factory that produces cookie cutter molded individuals, right? The entire process of education is about looking at individuals and looking at their uniqueness and actually designing things so that everybody can excel in their own way, right? There are few skill sets that we need, being commercially aware or communication, teamwork. Yes, that's all necessary, but those are all very general. But every student that comes through are unique individuals. So the challenge for us really in tertiary education is we are getting students from a system of 13 years of school, and the conversation around the school system probably is for another day, but how the students come to us, and all universities have 3 years to make that change and make them highly employable. So we cannot really do magic in 3 years. So I think this is something that we all have to appreciate and understand, that higher education institutions and the lecturers are not magicians, right? So the entire prep for talent should start from reception, or from kindy, where people appreciate each individual for who they are and try and cater learning around that. That's not easy for both the schools, the universities, or the organizations. But really, if we want to make an impact, that's how it's going to be done.
And so like you say, it's not easy, right? And that's usually what, in the name of efficiency and then hopefully effectiveness, we tend to look at larger clusters and we cluster people together, or we find a process that a majority can work, or there's a key group that can go into. So if you're saying looking at the individual, so yes, there's a core, yes, there's a foundation, yes, there's fundamentals that they need to look at and build, yet at the same time, we need to look at the individual and make the individual, look at what's special about the individual and work with that individual. What does that mean? What does that mean in brass tacks, right? Getting down to the nitty gritty, what does that mean?
So I'm going to take this from the perspective of an academic who teaches in a class, right? You sit in a class with 30 or 50 people. The opportunity you have is actually to connect with them, right? To understand a little bit about their background, about their values, and who makes the most influence. And we need to always remember that academics, if you look at your teachers, my teachers made the most impact in my life, right? I can't really remember whether it was maths or geography or history, but what I really remembered was the fact that they actually connected with me and understood what I didn't understand and changed their teaching to ensure that I understood it, right? It's very difficult when you have classes of 600 or 700. But I think whether it's in a classroom or whether it's in an organization, if we can spend some time, forget the curriculum at the moment, but spend some time connecting with people. So you see, in a classroom, we have students who come from rural Malaysia. We have students who come from the urban towns. All their experiences are different. So it is really important for us to spend a lot of time connecting with people and understanding really why are they there? What is their purpose? And then all academics, I think, have the ability to then work their curriculum around that so everybody benefits from it. So when we teach, it needs to be purposeful and intentional, right? So this may sound very, very vague, but we have a curriculum, but the challenge is how best do you then pass it on to everybody? I always tell myself, I am not a good teacher if I get straight A students and they go out with A's. I haven't made an impact because they've already come in with those A's, right? And the ability to think critically, etc. My success is when I get students who are struggling and then they get a B, C. To me, that's being successful. So that's my personal opinion. It's not about just get students with A's and helping them through and they go out with an A. So I personally feel I haven't impacted very much because they are intentional learners. But we have a big part of our country where students really need help and they don't know how to reach out to you because they don't know how to tell you what they don't know, right?
I'm just going to be a bit of a devil's advocate, right? And I'm thinking of it from an organizational perspective. Well, if it doesn't work and the person that we recruit, I need to do all this connection and pulling out of their purpose and understanding their journey, then I do what many top organizations do. I cut off the 10% that are underperforming, right? The 10% that in my whole list, what is the 10%, the lowest 10%, and I cut them off. And I top it off with the next batch of, the high flyers, the A graders who are intentional in their learning and perform, right? Wouldn't you say that is a strategy that's a viable strategy and it's worked for many organizations? So, why do we want to spend energy and time in a space that may not give us the right amount of returns or the returns that we want?
I think it's always very easy to get the really, really good talent, right? The top, because you they get grades, good grades, you know, they have a great personality, etc. But we also have people who have been excluded from that opportunity because of where they live, their socioeconomic background, their upbringing. It's a lot of things that had maybe put them at the periphery. So, but these are also talents, right? And they could be talents much better than someone who's graduated with first class. So the whole journey of crafting an individual's purpose and understanding what they need, it's not very difficult, and it honestly should be at the core of all organizations, right? I think if you look at 90% of this country, we have very, very good talents. It's just that we haven't polished them because we claim that we don't have time. But sometimes I think if we step back and we really reach out to people and understand them, we can create a position, we can create an opportunity for them in an organization that will benefit the organization far greater than someone went for great tuition, managed to study for an exam and get a first class, right? But I'm not dismissing how great first class students are. Fantastic first class students. But I also think that there's about 90% of the country that organizations, if they intentionally work on this process, it's not instant, but it is a process. And you see, when you do performance appraisals, you're not ticking a box. You're having a conversation. It's developmental, right? It's not a punitive exercise. So how are you talking to people? I hope so too. So are you actually asking them what their hopes and dreams are in working in the organization, right? What is where do they see themselves in 5 years in the organization? And I think all leaders have the duty, and I use that term because I think it is something that leaders must do. You must spend time understanding people, just like lecturers must spend time understanding a student, right? Whether you're a teacher in kindergarten, you're a teacher in year 1 or whatever year, when you talk to the students, you actually understand a lot more than just giving them revision questions or just teaching a class.
Right? It's very interesting how the same issue exists, but in a different form in two countries, right? You have Singapore, you have Malaysia, which you said, you have the 10%, but the 90%, there's a whole chunk that's not getting the support that they need to get, right? Whereas in Singapore, in my opinion, what we have is a system that gives the support to almost every individual in Singapore, or a growing individual in Singapore going through the education system. But what it has turned out is not a gap, but the middle ground, mediocrity. Yeah, in my opinion, that you find it difficult to shine if you go cookie cutter, right? So I'm just highlighting another effect of cookie cutter, that you can get everyone through, you can get that whole 100% through, or very close to 100% through, but you may end up with cookie cutters that are going around looking, we all sound and look and feel and act the same way, almost to the same way. Malar, are you ready to come in with your question, or shall I take on the next one?
Now you take on the next one, because I've got a couple of things that's running through and I'm
happening in your head. Yeah?
All
okay.
over. So I like to go first.
So I want to flip it to the other side, right? I want to flip it because I said it's like three stakeholders involved. There's the education system, there's the organization, there's the individual, right? And we talked a little bit about we started off education, but you very nicely bridged that to the what organizations should do in speaking about pulling out their intent, their purpose in life, right? Both the education system as well as organizations. Let's talk about the individual, right? What do I need to do in order to be recognized as a talent? Not for the talent for the chosen organization or the industry that I want to belong to. Right? What do I need to do? So I have purposefully looked at, this is the space I want to be in. I need to make myself relevant for that space. What do I need to do from an educational perspective to be able to stand up and say, hey, here's me. I want to be heard, I want to be looked at, and I want to be chosen.
Okay. So let's look at an individual, a student, right? So they're very clear with their career. They know what they want, but they live, just say, 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers away from the city. All right? They have no access to internet. They have no access to information, so they have to travel out. So I'll just give you a real example. When we went into lockdown, so we had those who had access, they just went on and went on with the classes. But those who didn't, the divide was so wide that they are now still struggling to catch up. So see, I think everybody has a desire. They will have a desire to want to be an engineer or a doctor. But the question is, do they have access to information? Do they know? So if I want to be an engineer, what kind of attributes should I work on, right? Do they have that kind of information? Who is helping them through that process? So I think a lot of us help people that are close by, but we have a lot of people in rural Malaysia, for instance, in smaller towns, in smaller cities. Who's really influencing them? Who's going out there and saying, you need to learn how to carry yourself very well. You need to learn how to articulate your purpose. You need to speak well. Who's helping them through that process, right? So we are saying there's a dearth of information on the internet. You have about gazillion online courses that they can go and, learn. But the question is, do they have the device? Do they have the connectivity, right? Do they even know where to go? There must be somebody who helps them, right? Otherwise, I mean, how many of us really gone into the internet and done 30, 40 courses because we know actually what we want? Even at this point, some of us can't craft out what do we want for the next 5 years, and we can't craft it out carefully. So imagine someone in rural cities trying to do that, right? Everybody when I speak to students from rural Malaysia, everybody has an ambition, right? They have the ambition, they know. If you ask them, tell me, where do you see yourself in 10 years? They can articulate it, but they just don't know how to get there. All right. So we also must remember some of them have families, the B40 families. And they have maybe six siblings. They have parents, and they live in a very small house. They have one device. So who gets that device during the lockdown? How many of them were left behind, right? So we had the benefit of having three devices: our phone, our mobile, our laptop, and our iPad. Some of them had to share one device. So, we need to systematically help people through a process. We cannot leave it to chance. Right? Over to you, ladies.
And the process is a process of finding out what is important to me. How do I get to what's important to me? How do I reach that? Some would say that's a process of coaching internally when you're in an organization, right? I remember a recent conversation with my 17-year-old, and we're talking about you have access to now counselors who in the poly can give you some idea of what direction you want to go in. We didn't have access to that maybe several years ago. I mean, even when I was not several years ago, many years ago. So yeah, I do agree there needs to be a way of helping someone to talk to show the path for us to be able to see the opportunities, because even as much as we can access something on a computer, how do we know we're accessing the right thing? Are we, and how do we know whether we are going in the right path? Then if there is some guidance, some mentorship, I think then that helps to a certain degree. Mallar, yes, over to you.
Yeah, first I'm going to read what Luis Moraes has written. He's written a long comment. Otherwise, he will stop coming again,
Yeah.
So yeah, he says this is one of my favorite topic. This is only because if primary and secondary schools are not sorted out, there's nothing college can do for them. The foundation of the nation is dependent on the basic education. And here in Malaysia, we've just got from bad to worse. So, do I agree with Luis? Sort of, right? I mean, I think for me personally, and I want to bring it out with Vinitha, is that I think on one hand, we're talking about employers and we're talking about the process of education, right? And I think we get what we measure, right? And our unfortunate definition of success is very important, right? Because it all depends on what you consider as success, right? And for me, as much as I want to blame the system, I think education of the parents' mind is equally important, right? Because I think the whole idea of success in education really starts from home, because I see parents rushing for the A's, and these are really very educated parents, right? Which is why we spend a lot more money on tuition than the school education itself. We are much more in a rush to get the children to catch up with their grades than to ensure understanding or even the well-being of the child. I think so. So there's that big thing going on there. As much as we want to blame the whole process, and I think the process is very important because we all follow the process, right? Because if my child is only going to get into higher education, if I want a scholarship or I want my child to qualify, if the qualification is now dependent on how many A's and everyone seems to be getting A's, then that's what we go for, because that's the process you follow. You become smart with the process, right? I wanted to just add that to what Luis was saying. But coming back to what Vinitha said, about 90% of Malaysian not having access and all of that. I think that's the whole, I don't know, it's probably a problem that we have at the infrastructure level, that I'm not sure whether we know what we want, right? And you've highlighted something really big and important. But I want to take you away from that and say, when we talk about a college education, right? And you said, every child is ambitious, and I agree with you. I'm wondering, in your experience, do we actually know how to connect what we want to be and what we actually do, right? Because, for example, a lot of times when young kids want to, when they want to become a lawyer, they think being a lawyer means practicing law.
Mm.
And if you watch Tamil movies, then it's that inspirational lawyer that you become. But law has got many. So I'm not sure when we talk about being a lawyer whether we know what we really want to be, or when I say I want to be an accountant, do I really know what it actually means in today's world? And because of that, I think we end up going on a process, or into a space where we think this is what I want to be until I get into college, probably get the degree, and then realize when I go to work that's not what I want to be. What's been your experience of young people understanding really what they want to do? Vinitha.
I think nobody can really understand, right? If I never
Yes,
dreamed of
girl.
being the vice chancellor. Until today, I don't even know what a vice chancellor really, really does, right? Um, so the idea of what I want to be comes from a lot of things. One is what they watch, right? Um, who has influenced them? So if they look up to somebody and they say, I want to be like you. So that's their idea of what that profession is. Or so they look at an accountant and say, oh, you're driving a fantastic car. That's my favorite car. Therefore, I want to be an accountant. Or, doctors are cool, have lots of money. My friends' parents are doctors and they go on overseas trips. Therefore, I'd like to be a doctor. So a lot of us have latched our ambition onto what it looks like, right? Not really, I want to be a doctor because I want to, cut open somebody's body and slice the spleen out or something like that. I don't think we think that deep, but we look at somebody's lifestyle. I look at my friends' parents and say, oh, they are engineers and they live in a beautiful house. Therefore, I think engineers make a lot of money and now they live in a beautiful house. I also then realize that they do things with renewable energy, and that excites me because when I hear them speak about it, I am intrigued with what they're doing. And that's really
Mm.
how students latch ambition, right? That's why we always bring industry people into the classroom so that they can share what it's like generally. What do they do, what kind of skills are required if you want to be a law enforcement officer, right? We have a very large law enforcement program, so we have law enforcement officers coming in and they tell you about the missions or the exciting stories that they do. They don't really tell you, I actually most days sit
I
down
fill in a lot
and
of forms and you fill in a lot of
documents.
forms. Yeah, correct.
Um, when I tell someone about how great it is to be a teacher, and I call myself a teacher because that's exactly what I do, right? Um, I love it. I absolutely love it. Um, I find so much joy being in a classroom. I don't find joy reviewing the education acts or reading new circulars, but that's really what I do. So can you imagine if I go into class and say, I spend 80% of my time reviewing circulars, and putting it into the system. People would never want to go down this road. If I tell you the problems I have marking assessments, it's a nightmare sometimes because of people's handwriting. And every time I mark an assessment, I ask myself, what have I taught them? Why are they answering like this? Right? You suddenly doubt yourself because you're thinking, did I actually teach you something that, what have you written? So when we talk to people, we don't really tell them about the mundane stuff, right? I have industry speakers coming in and saying, this is nice, but there's some things that we have to look for. And that's how people actually understand the profession, right? They don't know that lawyers maybe don't all go to court, but some of them just do the sale and purchase agreement or whatever else they do, right? Um, so so we don't have that kind of in-depth information. What we have is from people we see, movies we watch, and that's how we want to become who we want to become. I wanted to become a teacher because I absolutely loved my teacher, right? And I looked at my teacher and said, yeah, this is so nice, because I always felt warm in a class, because it was the best place to be. And I told myself, if I feel like that, I think I have an opportunity now to make people feel like that. I also wanted to be a teacher because I had some really bad teachers. And I watched them teach and I said, I will never teach like that. Right? So at the end, I became an accountant, just to let you know. But then I went back to being a teacher. So it is all about how you feel, right?
And how you feel can be, if I hear you right, can be shaped by the experiences that you've had with that area, that profession, that gave you some version of the truth, but not the whole truth, until you got your feet wet into it, right? So therefore, what would the counter be? What would be the position that we should go towards? If you say we're giving the ideal and it's not the whole version of the whole truth, then what would be what if you were to summarize it? What would be the ideal? What would it be for a person to choose? This is the path I want to go because this is clearly what I want to do, and I'm not going to go in there and then realize, this is not something I like. I burn out, or I just jump. I don't want to do this anymore.
So I think that's a very interesting question, but we have to ask ourselves, have we taught people to think, right? So from standard 1, have we actually encouraged people to think, to ask the right questions? So if we have not done that, regardless what I say in a classroom, if they cannot ask a question that answers what they want to know, then it becomes a very difficult process. So when I read documents and they say, these are skills that graduates are supposed to have. They need to be critical thinkers. I ask myself, critical thinking is a process. So if we have not encouraged people to think and ask questions and be open about it, how do we then give them information for them to process, right? So if you go into a classroom and you ask them, okay, what would you like me to teach today? It becomes dead silent.
Yep.
Right? Because I think we will reach a very comfortable space if people own their learning. And it's a very difficult thing, right? And so you walk into a classroom and you have the curriculum and the study guide and what they need to do today. And like, if you tell them, okay, look at it and tell me exactly what are some of the questions that pop up from this, it becomes quite difficult, all right? And unfortunately, some of us don't have the time to do these kind of activities in a classroom because we need to finish the curriculum, right? So that's a difficult space, because when I tell my colleagues, oh, let's do this, and they say, oh, please, we need to finish this because we have things to finish, we have to attain the learning outcomes, etc. We have to set the exams, which I completely agree. But I think sometimes in doing that, we don't step back and really ask them, what is it that you really want to know, right? And that they can only answer that if they have done pre-reading or they have been exposed, right? And they connect with people in the classroom, they can connect with the lecturer, then they are comfortable to ask a question, and they're not worried that someone's going to laugh or say anything. It's just that, right? If we go for seminar, none of us really ask questions.
It's not very far away from what happens in organizations and teams as well, right? If the team connects with the leader and feels safe with the leader, and there's trust in the team, then it becomes a safe place to ask questions or to throw, opinions around. So you've just touched on psychological safety, not in the classroom, to enable the voice to be heard. And to be heard, not just asking questions, but also giving opinions. I think that's a very important part of sharing what you have and the knowledge that you have. Malhar, I'm passing it on to you, Malhar.
Is Vinitha saying something? No.
Or also giving feedback, right? And just to add a little bit on that, sometimes it's the ability to articulate or the proficiency in a particular language. So if they think they can't string a sentence properly, they just choose not to say it as opposed to trying. Right? So it's also the proficiency of the language, whether it's in English or in Bahasa or in Mandarin, doesn't really matter, but it's just language, right?
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, so probably brought us back to where we started, with his purpose. What I took back, I know it sounds like a summary, but I have to summarize first before I can ask Vinitha maybe one or two questions, right? What I got from Vinitha is something that's probably close to all our hearts, right? Because I think all that you said, from where we get our ambitions from and how we decide what we want to be, right? So we are just people who collect all our experiences and make meaning out of it in our own world, right? And in the way we make meaning has a lot to do with the kind of exposure we get and how those things connect in our world, wherever we come from, right? So Vinitha gave this example of, how we look around at people and say, that's how I want to be. And, Vinitha, I've always wanted to be a teacher. Always, right? And I just the word teacher really makes my heart feel very warm. So I have a very special bias towards teachers. Any teachers I meet, right? And you're probably right, because as I thought about it and as you were talking about it, I had a string of very bad teachers until I met one good teacher who made a whole load of difference in my life. And that got me excited about learning, right? Because she did magic for me, right? She was magical, right? And maybe that's why I wanted to become a teacher, because before that, I don't remember having an ambition, right? Because when I'm not learning in school, what is there to have an ambition, right? And it's been I want to be a teacher all along, right? And so what I'm thinking is that when we talk about the corporate world, and whether we talk about advertisement or recruitment, I know we see very nice, beautiful words about the purpose of the organization, right? You join an organization and you want to contribute to the purpose of the organization. But I'm thinking of interviews and recruitment questions. How often people care about what's important for the individual? Because deep within, every individual wants to make a difference.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose and meaning we all draw from, right? To being and becoming the ideal, person that we want to be. And that is expressed through our talent, which we acquire through our education, right? And I'm so the question. I guess the question now is very much, as organizations, would we care to know what is the meaning and purpose for the individual, so that we can then tie it back to the organizational purpose? Because I suppose it's the question I'm asking, because I've never. So when I talk or coach to people who are going for interviews and they come to me, the one question they ask me is about being authentic. How much truth do I tell? Right? And that's a difficult question. Maybe that's why, I don't go for interviews, because I know I won't get employed. Right? Yeah, I know. I mean, really, I do know that. I know. I'm not saying it out of humility, but really, I knew that 22 years ago, right? That I won't get employed if I spoke my truth, right? Because on one hand, we see out there, organizations, individuals, leaders are saying, I love authentic people. But people who give authentic answers will not get the job. Because post interview, we hear leaders talking about what people should have been, not what they really are. So there's that gap about that's nice to have, thing that we put out, right? So how do we bridge this, Vinita?
So I think being
Mm,
authentic does not necessarily mean it you would say things that people don't want to hear, right? I think what is important is for all of us to understand, to actually write a purpose statement. So what's our real purpose? So when you articulate your purpose, right? Um, if it does not align with the organization, don't join, or don't hire people. It's just not going to work, right? Um, and crafting your purpose statement will take a while, right? It is as like today, my purpose is to move from success to significance. So whatever I do, I try to ensure that it really helps at least one individual a day. I don't do magic. But at the end of the day, if I reflect and I say, okay, today I think I impacted someone, and I should be able to articulate or write down who this person is, then I'm very happy. So if we can write our purpose statement, and our purpose statement changes in every phase of our life. When I started off, of course, I wanted to make money, whatever. So my purpose was very, very clear. And as you move on, you have children, etc. Your purpose changes. And your purpose needs to be your friends, your family, your job, everything has to be together. There is no purpose statement for my work, and there's no purpose statement for my home. It's one, because it is you, right? And if you can articulate a purpose statement in very clearly, people will appreciate it. And I have one maybe something I want to share, that if you want to articulate a purpose statement, I've developed a model. It's called VIN. It's the first letters of my name, which is VINI, and the V is for values. If you can put down your values very clearly, and I would tell everybody this: do not join an organization where your values don't align. It is not sustainable, right? If you can put down your values very well, also list down all the people who have influenced you. Look at their traits. What are the things that influence you? Who are the people that influence you? And the next thing is the N, is the norms. What is your norm, right? Norm in terms of how do you work as a person. If you ask me, for me, there's no demarcation between office and home. Because as a teacher, you take back work, right? So my work just goes around my family comes around my work. So it's all intertwined. So that's a norm, right? And exam period, I don't go anywhere because I need to mark the papers in a very short window and submit the grades so that my students can get their grades and move on to the next semester. So that's how my life is, right? I plan it around my work, that's a norm for me, right? The next one is the impact. What kind of impact do you want to make, right? So if you look at VINI, and it actually helps you craft out your purpose statement. And if you are able to articulate your purpose and your impact, what are your values, and how did it come about, who are your influences, and your norm, how do you live your life? And if you articulate this at an interview, I think your potential employers will appreciate it, right? Because you have clarity.
Nice,
Yep.
nice. Yes, Sham.
I cannot. I have to stop there because she said clarity. Let it sink. Let it sink.
Nice, nice. So, I don't know, Sham, do you have a last question before we summarize?
No, I'm good.
No,
Summarize.
I think Vinitha has actually summarized it really well with a model, which is
Yes.
values, influence, norm, and impact in the way she had explained. But I'm sort of centering around impact because I think that's the theme for us, which is purpose. All right. I think if we look at why we focused on purpose in July, right? Is like a lot of the things that we do, there is a purpose. It's a matter of whether we are clear about the purpose, right? We all do things that we do. We all make choices that we make because there is a meaning that we are drawing within. Whether we are aware of it and whether we are able to connect the dots within ourselves, I think is the question. And that's a big, I would say, personal development question, personal connection question, which is what we are trying to pay attention to. And, Dr. Vinitha has actually, yeah, earlier she already told me we remove doctor, remove professor, so now I'm trying to remember that, right? Unlearn that. So Vinitha, I think has clearly started the conversation with the purpose of education in that sense, right? Whether we are teaching people how to think, because if on the onset we know how to think, i.e., which is the purpose of education, learning how to think, because when you know how to think, you know how to ask the question. And when you know how to ask the question, you are making your own connection within. And then from limited exposure experience you get, you connect your dots. But life is not limited within the experience that you have. because you are now able to ask questions beyond that, right? And I think if we take that along, in the long run, I think we will continue to improve as individuals first, all right? And education will actually help us to do that. But what I really loved about, if not all, that Vinita said is that I think there is a gap that we're trying to now fill between the type of learners that we are creating in the system and the type of learners that is required in building a nation, right? And I think that's the gap that we are trying to fill, because we do know that we are producing a lot of graduates on paper, but what employers are telling us is that these graduates are not employable, right? And Vinita is talking about, and we are talking about these people who are accepted as gone through a proper school system, yeah. And Vinita is talking about the 90% that's untapped, that doesn't have exposure, right? So that it looks that we need to spend maybe a bit more time as organizations, those are corporate organizations that's listening in. We need to pay a bit more attention to say, how do we now bring all of this together and bridge the gap and perhaps contribute to the nation building for our own people, is what I'm getting. So we're probably ending up with more questions because education is a big thing. But we have passionate teachers like Vinita, who's not going to let us go without asking the purpose question. And I'm very grateful for this session for us to think about it. Don't know whether it summarized it, but yeah, Sham, you want to add?
There's only one thing I want to add to it. That what you shared today just brought to the surface the idea of your purpose not being one for the rest of your life, that your purpose changes at different stages of your life. And thank you for that reminder, because I think many of us hold on to what are your goals? It's like, what is your purpose? It's cast in stone and it can't change. It does change because life changes. Life does not always turn out the way we think, and so therefore we may have to make adjustments to our purpose. But knowing at every stage of your life or your career what your purpose is and aligning that to the organization, I think to the organization that you're looking to join, I think is a very critical thing. It's the first step. And sometimes before the organization says no, we as individuals need to say no, because this is not fitting with my purpose at this stage of my life. Right. So thank you, Vinita, for the nuggets on a Thursday morning. Thank you for joining us once again. And thank you for being yourself and being candid and open about your thoughts about education and how we play a role in it and how it.
I actually cannot imagine Vinita any other way.
I can't imagine myself in any other way either.
Yeah, so there was like cannot imagine. Before we
because
say
I absolutely love what I do. You attend some of my students' weddings and they actually thank you. And you have tears in the eyes thinking, oh my God, they remembered you. But the story they tell after that is quite horrifying, but it doesn't really matter, right? You made an impact.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So ladies, thank you very much for having me on the show. And it's an excellent show, so keep on doing good work here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
And you have a good day, Vinita. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Vinita. See you soon.
When she said about students coming up to her and saying you impacted their life, I remember my father.
Because they would say that to him.
Yeah, suddenly this random person will walk up, right, and tell my father, come up to my father, Mr. Sudan, do you recognize me? And I'm going, oh shoot, all right. Then of course he'll say no and say, yeah, I was in Sekolah Menengah Temeloh year, don't know what, you gave me 3 whacks with a rotan. This was discipline master. and then they go on, and I go, okay. Then they go on and say, those were the 3 best whacks because it woke me up.
Nice. But otherwise, they wouldn't come and approach you. They would have just avoided you. It wouldn't make a difference.
Like, can we run?
That's
All right, on that note, it's like you said, a big topic, education.
Yeah.
It's a topic that's very close to my heart for, I think quite obvious reasons. And we probably just scratched the surface of the topic. But I think we had some really, really good nuggets that Vinitha shared today. And thank you, everyone, for being on the show with us again today and for your comments. If there are other comments and questions that you have, you know where to put it. Put it on LinkedIn, on Facebook, as well as YouTube, and and as well as Spotify. If you have comments, we will get them. Okay, Mal, anything to say?
No. Thank you. Thank you for being such a great partner. I'm going to get off. So thank you, Sham. You have a great day ahead.
You have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next week when we recap July, the month of purpose. Thank you very much. Have a good day and stay safe, and bye-bye.